Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing, and thank you to all our panelists as well for being here. Mr. Chairman, the title of this hearing suggests that we've reached a tipping point in the video marketplace and that we may have arrived at a foreboding precipice for the future of video. While the mergers proposed between Comcast and Time Warner Cable and between AT&T and DirecTV involve some of the largest American telecommunications firms and tens of millions of American households, I'm not convinced they will necessarily change the market in a permanent or a negative way. That said, there's no doubt that these transactions are quite significant, and we are rightly here to discuss them and their potential impact on the marketplace and, most importantly, on our constituents. The marketplace for video services is dynamic and appears increasingly robust. It wasn't that long ago when meaningful competition to cable companies simply did not exist. Today, nearly all homes have 3 pay TV providers competing for their business, and that number is unlikely to be reduced by the pending mergers. In addition to the current facilities-based competition, there's a growing class of video services we call over-the-top. While this market is still nascent, it is also ascendant. Many of the companies driving it are household names that dwarf many traditional pay TV providers. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Yahoo, and Netflix are all investing tremendous resources in unique and previously impossible ways to capture a greater share of the video marketplace. Consumer choice for video delivery and video content is greater today than it ever has been before. The continued promise of increasing choice and consumer empowerment, however, will need an ever more cable broadband infrastructure, both wired and wireless. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm eager to hear how these mergers may improve the broadband network infrastructure on which our digital economy and video services increasingly rely. I'm particularly interested in what benefits these mergers would provide to people in rural areas, like in my home state of South Dakota and yours of West Virginia. It's also important for the committee to understand how competitors and other market participants may respond to these mergers if they are approved. Smaller video providers and content creators fear that they will get further squeezed as the big companies get bigger. Are these fears legitimate? And if so, can they be assuaged? Another aspect that should be discussed is the role of content creators and video programmers in shaping the future of the video marketplace. As large as some pay TV companies may grow, none will succeed in the marketplace without securing the rights to carry high-quality content created and owned by others. Bill Gates once said, and I quote, "Content is king," end quote. And that's certainly true for video. It is even more true for online video. So while broadband connection is essential, ultimately is the content delivered by that connection that drives demand and competition in the online video marketplace. In future hearings and outreach to stakeholders, we should solicit the input of online video providers and major unaffiliated video programmers to provide perspectives and insights into the dynamic interplay between content, platform, and infrastructure. I know the promise of online video is a subject you deeply care about, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to continuing to build the committee's record and explore ways to work together to ensure that consumers ultimately realize that promise. Thank you again for holding today's hearing, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stanke, my understanding is that South Dakota will benefit from AT&T's commitment to deploy fixed wireless local loop service to 13 million customer locations across the country. Can you please tell me a little bit more about the specific plans for this new service and perhaps, for instance, how soon those services could be deployed after the merger closes and what kinds of speeds customers might expect?
Certainly. South Dakota specifically, probably in the neighborhood of 135,000 new customers would get access to fixed wireless local loop. The technology will deliver a service of 15 to 20 meg. And in these rural and underserved areas, that is a meaningful step forward. And as I mentioned earlier, 20% of these customers only have a satellite-based broadband service today, and 27% only have a single broadband provider. So this will be a nice step forward for them. This is a different technology than our mobile technology. It is specific spectrum that we dedicate to a fixed solution. It requires us to do unique things on the cell tower to put in special antennas that transmit in a manner that achieves those higher speeds, and it requires us to do unique work at the customer's premise or location to put a fixed antenna in to achieve those speeds and those capabilities. It's a professional installation, and one of the benefits of doing this in the combination of this merger is that, as you know, rural customers oftentimes have an affinity for satellite television, and when we're out installing a satellite dish, we can now do the work to enable the broadband connection at the same time on one dispatch, consolidated on one bill. We think that's a good customer experience. And obviously, it's attractive because it puts more broadband on the market and opens up opportunities for over-the-top distribution into these customers that really don't have that kind of a robust solution today.
How soon might that come along, you think?
We'll start activity on actually constructing it the year that the transaction closes. We're expecting that'll be sometime next year. It'll take us a full 2 years to complete the build-out after that point. So it will take some time to get it done, and we'll introduce it in a rolling fashion. It won't be all one state at one time, but it will roll through the state.
Okay. Mr. Hurwitz, Professor Hurwitz, the closing thought from your testimony is that, and I quote, "We should be thinking about how to allow traditional television to operate more like online video," end quote. So when Chairman Rockefeller retires and he's sitting back and watching a few of his cable favorites like Fox News and MTV, I assume the goal is to get more, options, more opportunities available. Could you explain that statement and offer thoughts about what role this committee and Congress might play in that pursuit?
Absolutely. This ties into the beginning of my testimony where I note the continuing dominance of the linear channel model, and this is an area I note Mr. Kimmelman just complimented Comcast's Xfinity and X1 platform. I'm going to do the same. This is an area where Comcast has made some really interesting innovations, I think, to try and move the consumer's viewing experience on the MVPD platform away from Channel 11, Channel 12, Channel 13. What are the neighborhoods? Does it matter if CNBC and Bloomberg are right next to each other? No, it matters that you can go to your remote control, you can go to your computer, your device, and you can see the content that you want to see. There's a lot of implicit market power, a lot of implicit regulatory ossification and structure built into the traditional linear channel model. And that is something that we are seeing consumers able to escape from in the online world. It's something that creates a lot of opportunity for programmers, for writers and creators, and is something that I think this committee and Congress should do everything it can to enable and promote.
Mr. Kimmelman, do you believe Americans have meaningful choice today for video services? And if the answer to that question is no, what's your definition of what meaningful choice is?
I think they have more choices than they've had before at higher price points. I think we have not been able to succeed at getting the kind of full package choices, or the opposite, the kind of unbundled choices. You can't just buy Netflix without buying the broadband connection first, and you can't get a lot of individual channels you may want, even if you just want 5 plus Netflix. Without paying a large price. So the issue is not choice in the sense of, is it available in any form at all? For most people it is, although I commend the effort to do more in rural America, because that's clearly where the choices are more limited for broadband, not as much for video. What we don't have is the broader individualized selection driven by the consumer. It's driven by a packager right now, and that's our big problem.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, we have lots of people who want to ask questions, so I'll yield back my time. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a couple of quick questions here, and I want to follow up. Mr. Stanke, most wireless broadband services have data usage caps that are much, much lower than you're going to find on a fixed wireline broadband service. And my understanding is your wireline UVerse product's capped at 250 gigabytes a month, whereas a comparably priced mobile data plan is more like 2 gigabytes. So the question has to do, and we talked about earlier, this expansion and making this more available. What kind of data cap can we expect these new fixed wireless customers to see?
As I indicated earlier, we're intending to engineer this product like a wireline fixed broadband product, not a mobile broadband product. We haven't put the exact caps in place. We've done engineering studies to understand what we think is reasonable. I can't promise you that they will be the identical number that's on the UVerse construct that you just put forward, but we do know for a fact that they will be very de minimis. They will hit the very top 2% kind of thing, and it will be designed to find that abuse that's going on, not necessarily to prevent customers from doing the things that they need to do in their homes to use a broadband service. And it will be substantially different than what you see in a mobile broadband service.
Okay. Professor Hurwitz, back to you for a minute here. We've had some discussion today about the impact of these mergers and what it's going to do to both to consumers and to creators alike. As a professor of law and economics, my question is, do you agree with the views that have been articulated by Mr. Ryan regarding the economic literature on communications and media mergers?
The economics literature sides more along the analysis that Mr. Cohen gave in terms of unbundling. Generally, what we find is when we have large bundles of content, when we have large vertically integrated firms who are able to take greater risk, they're able to invest more in questionable and uncertain projects, and that's very frequently where the really great projects come from.
Okay. Mr. Kimmelman, as large as some of these MVPDs have become, they all apparently feel competitive pressure to acquire and deliver the so-called must-have programming. So I think the question is, no matter how many competitive distributors there are, don't we essentially have an auction where all the bidders win, but only after paying the highest price to content providers? And why would prices decrease when all distributors need to have essentially the same programming?
It's a very good question, Senator Thune. I think it is a problem. I think that's why we're in a bit of an arms race here, and I think it's worth looking at as a broader policy issue, that some of the traditional superficial analysis of what another competitor would offer may not be that productive from the consumer vantage point. However, I think what is changing is that on the broadband service distribution level, the ongoing culture has been much more of an unbundled, pick what you want. My kids don't even know what a channel is. They know a show. They know a video clip. They know something that's video streamed. I think the next generation is really moving towards a different experience and a different expectation for what they want from video. And so while some of the traditional marquee programming, I think, is in this high price range that will continue, I think there will be new product, especially if Mr. Ryan and some of the people like him can produce for online distribution and challenge some of those traditional companies. And then I think you'll see the market shake up a bit, because I think it's the business model of bundling that is really part of the problem here, and the ability to connect that then with a transmission system that's dominant. We probably, from what we know economically, are never going to get 10. We're not maybe even going to ever get to 5. We may not get to 2 in many places. I think what AT&T is trying to do is an interesting experiment using fixed wireless, but it's not been great in rural America for the whole bundled service. So we have a huge problem here of a highly concentrated market in transmission, and then these very popular set of programming. I think we need to have more choices so that those who are creating have more new ways to present it to the public, and we're seeing a new generation that wants it presented in a different way. I think it's great if Comcast does that as well, and AT&T, but I think we need to make sure that there are some new players who have a chance to break into that traditional high price structure.
Mr. Thune, if I may add on to that, and I would like to agree with Mr. Kimmelman and also Mr. Ryan in some respects. It is in many ways a real shame that we don't have any programmers here today, because the programmers are a very important part of this discussion, and their voice is absolutely lacking on the current panel. The advent of the new forms of internet-based technology really is an aspect of the tipping point that we haven't spoken about. When you look at the demographics, people under 25 today are consuming most of their video content online. The most recent numbers I've seen, under 25, it's about twice as much online video content as cable content, about twice as much cable content as traditional broadcast content. If you go into older demographics, it's still almost entirely traditional broadcast and MVPD content. So for the younger generations, in many ways, the tipping point has already occurred. On the question of wireless, this is a final point. We've spoken about wireless in several manners here. There's a lot of technology that we do not understand. A lot of really, really great cutting-edge stuff that is on the verge of becoming mainstream, on the verge perhaps 3 to 5 years, perhaps 5 to 10 years, particularly on the wireless front, on the network neutrality front. The FCC struggles with the level of technical sophistication needed to really address and understand these issues. I do not hold it against anyone in this room. We are not engineers. We are not trained PhD engineers focusing on these issues. It's really difficult to have an informed discussion about the future of competition, the future of network neutrality, without understanding complex issues like statistical multiplexing, how routers actually work, how prioritization would be implemented. So it's really hard for us to have a discussion about that. In terms of wireless, I'd like to just make one really amazing point. I'm following a lot of the technical literature about developments in the so-called millimeter wave bands. What could be possible using MIMO and millimeter wave technology for mid to short haul fixed line wireless in the next 3 to 10 years is incredible. I would say cable should be scared to death of what fixed line wireless can do, because it has the potential to have 10 times the capacity that that coaxial cable running to your house has. And that will revolutionize telecommunications.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you, panel.